Is it starting to get cold where you're living at? It's starting to snow in some parts of the countries. Nighttime temps are in the upper 20s, low 30s. This episode is going to be the one for you to listen to help you catch a lot more bass. So, as always, welcome to the Lure Lab presented by Omnia. And if you love bass fishing and catching bass on certain techniques and learning about new techniques and baits and setups and etc., and advice from top social media influencers and bass pro anglers, and or just listen to me talk about some of my favorite techniques, this is the podcast for you. Once again, welcome to the Lure Lab presented by Omnia, and everything that we talk about on this episode today will be listed down below, and you can use code SERIOUS10 to save 10% off of your order because the Lure Lab is a part of the Serious Angler Network. But we have an awesome episode for you today. We have Bass Pro Tour Pro Jake Lawrence joining us, and we're talking about his favorite baits and techniques for winter fishing river systems. He lives and fishes Kentucky Lake a lot in the TVA. So this episode, if you live in that range of the country, don't just be afraid of fishing it there, but these techniques can work wherever there's open water, anywhere else in the country. So this is a good one. Tons of juices dropped. Make sure you listen to the whole thing. And at the end, we'll see you there. All right. Well, welcome back to the Lure Lab, Jake Lawrence. Man, how are things? How is the rest of your season? How's winter going? Because it's kind of winter now, right?
It's starting to get there. I tell you, growing up and hearing and talking with all the kind of professional anglers, all I heard about was this slow off season. And man, we get to go sit in the deer woods and go hang out with friends in a duck blind. And I am a long way from that. It has been a very busy off season, if you'll call it that, but it's been a lot of fun. And of course, old man winter is starting to set in through much of the country, and this is it's a fun time of year for me. I find very little time now to just go enjoy myself outdoors, like no stress and not in a tournament setting, so to speak. So I have had an opportunity to do that. Got a chance to take the boys out fishing, and we've had fun, but it has been extremely busy. However, I honestly wouldn't want it any other way. So.
Hey, I mean, when you're busy, most of the time it means you're having fun some way or another. And I think that's a great way to look at it, right? Like if I'm busy, it means I'm doing something right.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely. You're exactly right.
well, Jake, we're bringing you on here today. I asked you to come on. We're going to chat about some winter techniques and baits, but I do have some fun, like one hitter questions for you. And I'm sure we're going to have elongated answers from them because that's usually how these short questions go with everyone. But to kind of start off the show here, and it's kind of like a personal question. I want to know, what is the coldest day and coldest water temp you have ever caught a bass in?
Okay, so coldest day. This probably wasn't temperature wise, but what, felt like cold on me.
Oh, rain in
Was
this time of year is awful.
Yep. It was actually last year. I have two particular scenarios. One was last year in the invitationals at West Point Lake, which I mean, it really wasn't that cold. Like I say, it was, high 30s, low 40s, but it rained from the moment we woke up until long after weigh-in had concluded. And I don't care what you're wearing, what you're doing, as much as I was running and gunning, we've got stuff blowing down, we've got it coming up. I was soaked to the bone. I did. I do remember fishing fairly comfortable that morning, but about 11 or 12 o'clock, it got absolutely brutal. And the other time was actually in college at Gunnersville, which I feel like we're going to see this here very soon with the start of the BPT there. But it was in mid-February, and it snowed. Anybody that's listening to this that fished that old Southern Collegiate series remembers this event. It was the biggest snowflakes I have ever seen, still to this day. And we caught them in like literally 16, 18 inches of water. It was a really unique, still don't really fully understand why the fish were up that shallow, but you could not throw your trap shallow enough to get those fish to eat. So we caught them both days, but boy was it brutal. And again, I look to see that happening again come middle of January for our first BPT.
Yeah, I think there's this like misconception. I have a question regarding that, but I feel like there's this giant misconception in the wintertime that every bass in the lake goes deep, right? Like there's always shallow fish, and I feel like, and you can tell me if I'm wrong here, but I feel like shallow fish in the wintertime are more apt to eat than
They
deep fish, right?
they are they're you have to be careful with saying they're more aggressive, but they're certainly easier to present a bait to. Even without forward facing, just being able to put your bait in that little zone where the majority of the population is living. It's obviously way easier the shallower that you get, and oftentimes we see that. It's certainly prevalent, probably the most prevalent in the wintertime, just because their metabolisms are a little slower. Everything's strike zone wise is a little smaller, but really we see that year round. The shallower a fish is, generally speaking, the easier he is to catch, and again, I feel like a lot of that is just odds. Obviously we have to present our bait to that particular fish correctly, but getting your bait in that little zone, the correct zone, not just a zone, but the right zone to trigger that bite is very, very important.
Yeah, and I feel like, and I could be completely off base here too, but I feel like shallower the bass lives, the bigger its strike zone is. Like you can mess up a
Yep.
little bit and still get bit shallow because like the way I look at it is like, oh, there's docks. People are always dropping food in off docks. You have trees, things falling out of trees and whatever, right? Like they could come 10, 15 feet away if they hear something that sounds natural and food like and come and get it. As we're out deep, like if you're fishing a brush pile or a stump or a boulder pile, I feel like if you don't hit that directly right in that 1 by 1 square box, a lot of times they ain't biting it.
You're exactly right, and some of that I think has to do with it being that shallow, but a lot of it I have found also has to do with how they're setting up. You said it best. Any kind of little isolated piece of cover that they're calling home, they're generally, again, much less apt to move away from that kind of homestead, so to speak. Whereas a fish up shallow, and when I say shallow, that's obviously a relative term. In this case, I'm calling less than 4 feet of water. There's generally less current, or excuse me, less cover up there, and they're more apt to kind of cruise around. And when you see those that are not on a specific target, those are the ones that the strike zone really opens up and gets big, and they'll chase a bait a long, long way, a lot further than what we give them credit for sure.
And I'm sure we're going to be talking about this, and you've already slightly mentioned it because we're going to be talking about wintertime techniques, but that's where trap plays big time. Like, doesn't really matter what the water temp is, it's just something that's going to intrinsically hit their lateral line and cause them to move and come get it, right?
Exactly.
And, so based on that kind of chat, we're not talking about the bait chat. I'm going to hold off on asking
Hmm.
you there because I got a couple more fun questions for you. But in your eyes, Jake, what do you think the biggest misconception is that anglers have when targeting bass in river systems during the winter months?
What is the biggest misconception in river systems winter time? There are several. One of which, we previously just talked about with everyone thinking that they go out really deep. River systems in particular, or it could even be a man-made lake that's got a dam and is generating water. Oftentimes, at least in this part of the world or the country, this is when we get a lot of our rain. Starting really mid-December through end of May is kind of our wetter time, and so that's usually when they're flushing the systems, and we see a lot of this current flow. So the current to me is one of the biggest keys in wintertime fishing in dictating what I'm going to do, where I'm going to go, and kind of how I'm going to target a particular whether it be even really smallmouth or largemouth spots, either one. That is what's purely 100% going to dictate how and where they're going to set up, and it's oftentimes not all that deep. Again, there are exceptions to anything, but the more current that a body of water is generating, and the more flow through it, oftentimes the shallower they get. I'll give everybody a little, kind of a sneak peek here on Kentucky Lake, and really the whole TBA chain, but Kentucky being the last on the system, we see a lot of this current flow in the winter. It is not uncommon at all in December, January, and certainly February and March for me to catch them in less than 2 or 3 feet of water,
Sign me up. That
with that
sounds
current
fun.
flow. Yeah, yeah, it's really, and there are a number of factors as to why that is. Obviously, the closer you get to the bank, the more current breaks and little eddies and places that they can get out of the current and utilize, let the bait and the forage get washed to them. But I think it's also something that we don't think about, and kind of go back to your question of a big misconception, regardless of whether it's a river system or not, is when we have these little warming trends, and again, when I say warm, that's relative to what it has been in the last, say, 12, 14 days. When we see those warm trends, say it's water temperatures are low to mid 40s, and it's highs in the upper 50s, significant difference between the air and the water temperature. Those fish will oftentimes move up really, really shallow and try to absorb as much of that heat as they can. And again, some of the biggest days that I've had as far as wintertime fishing has been in less than 5 feet of water. Now, with all that being said, it is most of the time it is critical that we do have deep water close. But again, most of them are not actually utilizing it. They tend to use more vertical, steeper drops,
Twice bluff
something
walls
with
are
a,
so important in the
yes,
wintertime, right?
exactly. And the reason for that, obviously, there's a lot of forage, there's a lot of great opportunities along those bluff walls, but most importantly is if we have one of these warming trends, they can simply slide up really shallow tomorrow or even maybe that night. Obviously, everything cools down. They can slide back down. They can find their comfort zone and not have to swim, latitudinally speaking.
Yeah.
They don't have to swim very far to find anything and everything that they need.
I love that. So before we get into our bait and technique questions here for you, the Lure Lab is sponsored by Omnia, and we work with Omnia. So the Omnia Juice of the Week question, and I don't know if you use it or not, but they have this Premium Pro feature that shows like wind current, water temp, etc. So, and that's where the question is going to be based off is, do you believe current stability is more important in the winter over water temp?
I do. I do. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, let's break that down. In terms of where they're going to be positioned, absolutely. Current flow over water temperature. When I start getting into technique or bait selection, current flow is certainly a part of that, but water temperature does become a larger factor there. It's kind of a two-toned approach, but both are applicable for their own kind of reasons, so to
Sure.
speak.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm not much of a winter fisherman on a river system, right? Like if I'm in the river, I was texting you this morning, I'm fishing for
Right.
Lake Run steelhead. But in the springtime when it's still cold in like the low 40s, we will get a lot of those Great Lakes fish that will migrate into these creeks, and it's the same thing.
Yeah.
So current means more than the water temp, etc. It's just you got to find what they want to be in, and then you can get bass.
Correct. Correct. Yes. Absolutely.
So, as we go into the actual part of the Lure Lab podcast, right now we're going to start talking about baits and techniques. And I'm not sure how many you want to go through because I'm sure there's a laundry list of baits we could chat about, but maybe like our top three baits and techniques. And I'm assuming the lipless is one of them. So, do
Absolutely.
you want to start with the lipless and kind of work from there? Because I feel like that's
Ab-
an unbeatable technique, and especially late
Absolutely.
winter.
Yeah, not a big shocker at all here for the lipless being. Honestly, it's generally speaking, regardless of which river system and really at what point in the winter, we're talking, a lipless is something that I'm always going to pick up. I say always. The majority of the time, that's what I'm going to pick up first for a number of different reasons. Obviously, first and foremost, it's the best way to cover a ton of water. And that's something that, regardless of the time of the year, we've got to put ourselves in front of these fish as quickly as possible, to have a successful day out there. So any time of the year, my bait selection is going to be based first and foremost off of, what's efficiently, what can I efficiently get through whatever the cover is. But outside of that, what can I cover the most amount of water with? Even if it's something that may not be the very best technique, but it gets me around them the fastest. So obviously, this is, and one thing I do, there are a number of traps that I throw, but the old school Bill Lewis, this is a half ounce. I also throw the 3/4 as well. That is what I prefer in the coldest parts of the winter. So, like, call it from now to the mid December or so, I'll throw the hammer trap. I'll even throw the little 1/4 ounce, old school Bill Lewis. There are a number of good traps, but I will say the colder the water temperature, obviously the slower I'm going to fish this bait. And for whatever reason, the OG, Bill Lewis, to me, has the best vibration at the slowest pace. I mean, I am at some points literally crawling this thing, like dragging it like a Carolina rig, and I'm gonna have a few people upset that I kind of let that out, but you can 100% catch them on. It probably works for a lot of different, traps. But when I'm gonna drag one or fish it really slow, that OG Bill Lewis is always what I'm gonna go with. Generally, big shocker here. Start with some sort of red. Although,
That was my
in a
next
lot of
question.
rivers,
Like, what is the way you approach bait color, right? Like, obviously, there's grass, you're gonna throw red, but like from there, where do you go?
even without grass, I
Really?
still, here on Kentucky Lake, unfortunately, we have not had grass in, gosh, 10 or 12 years probably, and don't really see, it happening anytime soon. But red is still a big player here, with or without grass. I feel like a lot of it has to do with our crawfish population kind of molting and turning colors and kind of doing their deal. But there's just something to red. Even times when they're feeding on shad or bluegill, I feel for whatever reason in the cold weather months, red is a very prominent color. I think some of it has to do, and I don't have any kind of scientific, knowledge to really back this up, but I feel like all loud colors. Like you'll notice a lot of my wintertime, color schemes are a lot brighter, a lot more loud. The warmer the water temperature, the more natural and translucent I tend to go with. Then, of course, if you're talking fairly dingy or even getting into stained water, obviously we're going to go with our chartreuses and blackbacks and our school bus colors and our lime greens, our bright colors. But just on average, whether it's, call it 2 foot of visibility or 6 inches of visibility, red is generally where I'll start this time of year. Although, with that being said, I have on a number of occasions caught them, on those more translucent. Another color that I like. This happens to be an MR6, but this is a, what we call guacamole, but it's a root beer color. It's
Yeah.
just a real natural. It's loud. It's kind of, got a lot of white, little chartreuse, but overall, a somewhat natural shad pattern. So
Real quick
that
on
is,
root beer. Do you
huh?
think the color pattern of root beer, no matter like what it is, like that molded, like speck,
Uh-huh.
black, white body, yellow belly, right? Like, do you feel like that's one of the most slept on, like traditional bait colors there is for whatever brand it is on the market?
Absolutely. Like you will see if a manufacturer makes that color in a hard bait,
Y-
I own it. If that is a bait that I throw and they make any form of that, there are a couple other kind of off colors that are fairly similar to that kind of general pattern. That is by far my favorite, and truly feel like that's one of those colors. It's kind of like your, blackback chartreuse square bill. Like it can kind of cover, may not be the very best option, but it can kind of cover you in most any scenario or situation you're going to come across.
Sure. Yeah, man. I feel like root beer, like I have some in my box and I'm like, there's gonna be a day. Like there's always
Yep.
that day that's all they eat. And I'm like, yep, I'm glad I have it. No one else does.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I don't really know. It's funny, I haven't even really thought about that prior to you bringing that up,
Yeah.
but it is. It's a very slept on color. I've had several people kind of give me the side eye when I tell them I'm throwing a guacamole root beer style color.
Yeah, another
But
one
it's just,
too that I feel like has kind of gone away, and that like if you go back in the archives of bass fishing, fire tiger, right? And a crankbait,
yep,
it's another one, but when that water first starts warming, I feel like fire tiger is another great bait
yep.
color that people are like, no, fire tiger, what is that gonna catch?
Yep, I agree. I agree. It's just one of those colors, and again, it kind of goes back to that louder, more vibrant
Mhm.
colors, in the colder water. But getting back into the lipless here, again, there are so many different ways to throw this bait and different applications that we can use it. Really, specifically talking about the winter, the pace really of all of these baits, the pace at which I'm going to fish them is very important. I've seen numerous days, any of the three that I have in front of me, one little cadence change made all the difference in the world. Whether it's from yo-yoing it up, dragging it real slow sideways, just a slow, steady, kind of methodical wind. There's usually a cadence that they're really going to key in, and something that I think is important, again, kind of regardless of technique specific, is that is the cadence at which they want the bait is so important when their strike zone is somewhat small. They're a little more lethargic. It seems like it's way more pronounced this time of year. And so I always encourage everyone, our favorite thing to do when we get a bite is reel that one in, unhook it, and get back in there just as quickly as possible. But if you can, take a moment, take a picture of that fish, let her go, and just kind of observe what was happening. Obviously, where that fish was positioned, but most importantly, how were you fishing it when that fish bit? Because again, it is super critical this time of year. The slightest little change can really be a deal breaker, for a given day. And what's funny is tomorrow it can be something totally different. So always keep that in mind. But a couple key ways, again, yo-yo this bait, a steady retrieve, that real slow kind of, we call it rigging it.
Yeah. You
It's
just
very
throw 'em
similar
just
to Carolina
barely
rigging.
vibrating the rod
I
tip.
mean, you said it exactly right. You want it to where it just starts to vibrate.
Sure. Now, what is your
But
setup for throwing it? Like rod, reel, line?
yeah, so I'm a little different. A lot of guys like to throw their traps on, a chatterbait style, like a heavier graphite rod. I really want to have as much feel this time of year as possible. So I'll stay in that composite. Mine is it's a Caden, it's a Dobbins Caden series
Mm,
743. No, excuse me, 744 is what I throw my traps on, and throw my chatterbaits on the 45. But it's really a good parabolic rod. It's got a lot of backbone to it for a cranking style rod. But most importantly, I can tell the difference if we're going over little bitty pebbles, baseball size rock, whether it's shell or whatever, cover is there. I can feel it. I know instantly that that's what I'm in and where I'm at. And to me, that is super important. But again, I do encourage, go with the softest rod that you can that you have, because these fish a lot of times, they're not running down there at 100 miles an hour and pinching this thing to the bottom, so to speak. A lot of times they just kind of come up and barely nip. You'll have a lot of them on the back treble hook, just barely hooked this time of year. And so I really do think that a limber rod, a rod with some give to it, will definitely increase your hookup and your landing ratio. But one of the most important things, with most any what I call a winding bait, something I'm going to cast and wind straight back, I generally stay in that 6-1 or 6-3 to 1 gear
Mm,
ratio. However, with a rattle trap, I really like a fast gear ratio reel. It's fairly uncommon, honestly, that I'm just truly doing a steady, slow wind. Most of the time, I'm imparting some sort of action that's presenting slack to the bait. Again, whether you yo-yo it up, drag it to the side, I might steady wind and give it a couple twitches. When you give it that pause and that bait starts to drop, that's oftentimes when you're going to get the bites. And I really want to be able to pick up that slack, extremely fast.
sure.
So I really like a 7-1 to 1, 7-3, anywhere kind of in there.
And you still
I'm
have enough
actually
winching power too.
correct, absolutely, absolutely. That becomes a little more important when you're around grass, and again, here on most of the river systems that I'm fishing, it's primarily shell and rock, so you're fairly good as far as cover. Honestly, in my scenario, when you hook one, the worst thing you can do is really horse that fish and try to get him to you. There's not much out there for him to get hung on, so you just kind of take it easy and kind of let her or him kind of do their thing out there, wear themselves down, and you can usually scoop them up. But a fast gear ratio reel. I do like one with a bigger spool capacity. These traps, you can cast them an absolute mile, and you
No
don't want
joke.
a little bit of line left. That's really going to decrease your line capacity, per turn there. So I've been throwing the new Bates Hundo 50. It's a really cool reel. It's got a super small profile, a housing, so to speak, but a really big spool capacity.
Yeah,
So it's kind of the best of both worlds there.
I really enjoyed my hundo that I had.
Yes, yes. Did you have just the standard hundo or the salty hundo?
No, the standard,
The standard,
the
yep, yep.
standard hundo. The issue was I set the hook on a smallmouth and I blew the side plate off, and now the
Really?
yeah, I think it just got loosened in my rod locker running through
Well,
big waves.
get get with me after after we finish this up. We can get you squared away. They've got a great warranty team there, and I've been fortunate. I say I fished
Crazy. It
a
actually,
tremendous amount of days,
you
and
can't see it, but I got a big scar on my finger from it too. It's kind of wild.
no
Yeah, I
way.
loved
I
the
love
reel, but
that.
I set the hook on like a 4 pounder. I was just like, what the heck? Like,
That is crazy. I've
100%
never
me.
heard of
It was
that.
probably me, but yeah,
Yep, absolutely,
yeah, is what
absolutely.
it
But
is.
but moving, back to let's talk about where we're going to throw, a lipless.
Sure.
Again, it's a very versatile bait. You can cover a tremendous amount of water, variations of water, but primarily where I'm going to target, a lipless this time of year, and really, we're talking from middle of November to say the end of February. They're generally speaking current, based. They're probably going to be doing roughly the same stuff. So any little shallow points, any little shallow bars that come off the bank, anything that's flatter is what I'm really looking for in the trap. That's where I'm going to pick the trap up
Winter
over
fishing
something
101,
else.
Main Lake Flats.
Yep, exactly, exactly. However, I have had some exceptionally good days fishing in the very backs. I say in the very back, wherever when you go into a main tributary on a body of water, wherever that tributary starts to flatten out, and it's usually in, call it the back third of the
Wherever
bay.
the
Uh,
drain begins or whatever, right?
Correct. Kind of the last steeper banks, and they start to turn into that kind of flatter, slow tapering banks is also a great place to target. Again, that's usually when we haven't had as much rainfall and there's not a ton of current in the lake to position those fish where they need to be. But you would be really surprised on river systems just how often these fish will get out in the current. If there is current on a body of water, that's where I want to be, because that is oftentimes where the biggest congregations, schools of fish, groups of fish are going to be. And when you find them, they are the absolute easiest to catch. So
I think if
a
there's
trap,
one thing in bass fishing or fishing in general that like throws the book out the window, right, is the great negator is current.
yep,
Like
it's current.
it doesn't matter what the weather system is most of the time or what's going on. If you have stable, steady current that's not rising or falling,
Yep.
they're gonna bite in it at some
It,
point during the day.
exactly, exactly. It's just again, it can seem challenging because it will truly consolidate a lot of these fish down into a very small area. And
It's just
man,
winter
I
fishing.
numerous times I've gone out and thought, man, there is not a bass left in this place. And you figure out the deal, and it literally goes from 0 to 100 in one stop,
Yeah,
and usually it's fairly patternable. When
yeah.
you figure out what that is, that's not the only place on that body of water that they're doing it at. So, again, the flatter places, it can be a number of things, but generally speaking, those kind of main lake, shallow flat points, here on Kentucky Lake, we've got a ton of bars and little shallow high spots out there that they really like to get on. So that's where I'm really going to utilize our lipless crankbait. Moving into
Yeah.
really kind of my next stage. Let's say we've checked a lot of that stuff. We've spent a couple hours with our OG Bill Lewis, and we're just not getting a lot of bites. At that point, I'm going to generally switch to more of the steeper stuff. If they're not on the flat stuff, let's go to the next best thing. And again, just as we've discussed earlier, a lot of times these fish will relate to the steeper drops, the steeper banks, but still be up there fairly shallow. And that's where a little flat-sided crankbait is going to come into play. This one in particular is an MR6. You'll notice got a very narrow bill there. It's really important in the wintertime to have. I say this when we go back to the old wiggle wart, and it's totally different. But generally speaking, you don't want something overly erratic this time of year. And the MR6 really, to me, kind of fits the bill. It's got an aggressive thump to it, but it doesn't hunt and kind of overwork itself, so to speak. And that particular plug runs in the 6 to 8, maybe 9 or 10 range if you really go down in line size.
I feel like
Um,
an event that the MR6 was kind of put on the map. What was it? The first time was the classic that they went to Loudon, right? I
Yes,
think with
yes,
Jacob Wheeler. Yeah,
correct,
I feel
absolutely,
like he was cranking them. I was
absolutely.
like, I don't know if I can ask this question. I was like, is Jake? Then I was like, wait, wrong tour.
Yep, yep, yep. Now, hey, I follow. I'm a student of all of them. I
Yeah,
assure you. If there's been a tournament in the last 20 years, I mean, I remember it right offhand, but I guarantee you I followed along, and and uh,
100%.
and I
Oh,
do,
and
I do
I'm gonna
remember that
apologize
tournament.
right away. Like, I knew that you weren't on like that tour, right? But like lack of sleep the last couple days, I was like, I just need to make sure. Like, okay,
Yep,
good.
yep, yep, yep. No, I was there in spirit,
Yeah. The
and
last thing
and
I
that
want to do
was
though is incriminate any of you guys like with
no, no,
questions
no,
and
no.
stuff. So yeah.
But that is a great example of one of those flat sided tournaments,
Yeah.
and you see that a lot when that bite is happening, and they're on the little flat side. There is not a better way. Again, you're kind of covering all of your bases. We're covering plenty of water. And we've got the cadence down, whether that's, I've caught them in the winter really winding, a flat side pretty fast.
So
Not super common, but you can, that can be a major player. But the MR6 is one that stays on my deck usually from the middle, let's call it the 1st of November if I'm a little further north, through really the end of March, even sometimes into April. That flat side will still play. And, again, this is when I'm going to shift more to the steeper banks, your bluff ends or little rock transitions along creek channel swings. Anything that our lipless isn't going to stay in contact with the bottom, and that's
sure.
another thing that I really failed to mention. at least the first two baits here, they're all going to be making bottom contact, and I think that that's something that's really crucial this time of year. Obviously, we know the deflection factor is a
Right.
great way to elicit a what we call a reaction strike, and that's something that's really important this time of year. I feel like I definitely can create a few or generate a few more bites over the course of the day by keeping that bait, in a some sort of deflection.
Sure. Now
Um,
let me ask you this one, Jake.
mhm.
Why ABS plastic over balsa? Like you're in that neck of the woods where balsa is kind of a big deal in the wintertime. So, but do you find yourself gravitating to a plastic style flat side over a balsa? And why?
I do primarily, and here's the main reason. I love balsa baits. They do have a totally different action, kind of all to themselves. However, they are extremely light. And as we know, in the wintertime, it is very rare to have one of those days where the wind is not blowing.
Truth.
And that's something that I fight all the time. And I'm not going to say that I don't keep a few balsa baits in the boat with me, but it's really kind of a situational, bait where I'm really only going to throw it when the conditions are, perfect for it. And the ABS is just, to me, it kind of fits, fits what I'm doing. I can cover a lot more water by casting an extra, call it 15 to 30 yards on average each cast, and that really adds up at the end of the day. Kind of a side note here, something that's really interesting. I've always been a big efficiency guy. I've never felt like, I can generate a bite any better than you or the next person. But I've always kind of felt like if I can keep my bait in the strike zone longer, that's where I'm going to excel or really get myself ahead of my competitors. The BPT format has put a ginormous exclamation point on that. Like, I thought I was all big into, efficiency rate prior to this past season, but it has put me on a whole nother level. Like, I think about stuff all the time that I would have never thought about. Again, like getting this bait an extra 15 yards further on
Yeah,
every cast. That's a couple percent more each day, which over a
love
4-day event, that adds up into 10 or 12, maybe even 20 or 30 extra scoreable bass. And that goes a long, long way. So,
100%, especially when you're able, and I think that's another advantage with plastic over balsa, right? Like we kind of mentioned with the wind factor, but just like the castability and how you can be so much more accurate while throwing the
yes,
ABS baits as opposed to balsa. Now, some balsa they do cast great, but most of them is like throwing a potato chip in the wind. They're just
it is. Yep.
okay. You were going there, but now you're 40 feet to the right because I got a 30-mile-an-hour gust. I'm screwed.
Yep, and I'm not one. If anybody, here listening has ever spent any time in the boat with me, that boat is practically on plane all day long while I'm fishing.
Yeah.
Like, I do not like to mope around, and it just drives me insane to have to sit there. Like, I can see the cast. I know if there is a bass right here, he's on that cast. And if it takes me 2 or 3 casts to get to where I'm trying to be, it just slows me down, frustrates me, and you said it best. Like the ABS is a lot more forgiving. It's a lot more durable. This time of year, it's not uncommon, to sling it up on the bank or around the boat dock, whatever it may be. It's a lot more forgiving. You can get away with a lot more with an ABS.
The last thing you want to do is put a big dent in your balsa bait, and all of a sudden it was running
Yep.
true and not so much anymore.
Yeah, and that's another good point. The balsa baits are, I don't have any problem at all tuning a crankbait, but the balsas are a little more difficult at
Yeah,
keeping that true tune, and that's all part of the kind of the homemade, aspect.
it's the
Every
cool
one of
part.
them slightly different, and I do have a couple. I have a particular balsa bait that I throw some, and I have one. I have no earthly idea why, but they bite that one way better than they do all the rest of the exact same model. It's really funny. You look at it in the water and you can't tell anything different, but there has to be
There's just
something
something
to
maybe
that
like the
particular
head
balsa
weight
bait.
is a little bit slightly low when you're cranking it down, right? Or the way it pauses and shimmies. Like it could
Yep,
be
there is something to it, and I would pay a ridiculous amount of money to replicate whatever that exact bait is. And again, that's the great thing. ABS, you still will see that occasionally. There's just something to this particular bait, but for the most part, they are very, very consistent and all run fairly good. Let's face it, it's pretty rare to get any crankbait out of the package anymore and it be tuned. I really don't understand that. I'm not knocking anybody. It's totally fine. It doesn't take, just a couple seconds. And hey, if that helps on the cost side of things, then I'm all for it. And that may be, a big part of why that is what it is. But I do like, once I get one tuned, I like it to stay tuned.
Yeah.
I'm not uncommon. I'll pick a day, like I'll get a big tackle order in, and I may run to the lake and literally pull over, power pull down, and just tune crankbaits for a couple hours. Like it's,
It has some
you know,
work. God bless your
it,
soul.
it is, but again, it all kind of goes back to this efficiency factor.
Yeah.
When I'm
If you do
in the
it
heat of
now,
the
you're more
moment,
efficient later.
exactly. When I know I need, say a Delta Red instead of a guacamole MR6, I know I can pull it out of the box and it's going to run perfect straight out of I say straight out of my box, but
Yeah, straight out of the
there's
box. It's
no
fine.
time left there to spare. So
Love it.
we try to get every cast in possible.
Heck yeah. Now, what is your cranking setup, real quick? And then we'll get into the final technique and we'll cut you loose.
Yeah, absolutely. So a 704 is really what I'm throwing my small little flat sides on. That is the Champion Extreme model.
Good rod.
However, you get into some of the bigger plugs. I do kind of go back to that Caden, 734 or 3, just kind of depending on how big and how much, what kind of cover I'm around. I always want to go as limber as I can get away with this time of year, but still have that backbone. And a great example of this is, I want to say it was last December. It might have been in like the 23-24 winter, but I got on a lay down cranking bite. And I had 2 or 3 really big ones that just, man, they manhandled me. I mean, that rod just wasn't enough for that heavy cover. Once I got them away from the cover, we could play it cool and take our
Yeah.
time. But the first, call it 4 or 5 seconds of that hookup was my problem there. And so I did. I had to beef up, and you may lose a few more that you hook up, and as soon as you lean in, they kind of pull off. They just don't get the bait real good. But if you're around that heavier cover, I will bulk up and go with a little heavier rod. But
And sometimes it's a little bit harder to cast the bait too, the slightly beefier rod too, right?
it
Like
it
you're
is it
losing the
is
whippiness to get that light crankbait out.
correct. But my overall kind of standard tried and true is that 704. And it's a little shorter, but I like it because I find a lot of times I'm making these little short roll casts. Not
Mhm.
always, but you'll be going down a call it a channel swing, and there'll be a one isolated dock or a lay down or whatever it may be that I need to make that precise little cast. And to me, anytime that I'm making those short little roll casts, a 7 foot rod, it's just what fits me. I can get the bait to, or excuse me, get the rod around,
Sure.
quickly and get the rod to unload. It's just a kind of my, happy spot there with that short roll casting. But do know a lot of guys that'll go up to, 7.4, 7.6. Again, the majority of our cranking this time of year is bombing it way out there and not so much precision. But
Yeah.
that 704 really kind of fits the bill for me, when it comes to wintertime cranking.
Sure. All right. Well, man, now I want to go winter cranking. Thanks.
Man,
So,
I'm ready
what
for it.
to wrap it up
We've
here?
not had a lot of rain here. Although I say that it is finally letting loose here. We're getting a little rain, call it for the next 24 hours, 36 hours or so. And I would imagine all that we're going to be discussing is going to be in play, call it, 36 to 48 hours from now. I'm very well maybe catching them on a couple of these baits
Oh man,
here
I
on
look
Potomac
forward to
Lake.
seeing a picture or two, hopefully. So,
I'll send them over. I will.
nice.
I will. But there is one side. So we've talked about a lot of current flow or a lot of how I tackle a body of water that has current flow. And again, what's probably the most important is to know that when we've got current flow, most of the, if not, I don't want to ever say all, but the vast majority are going to be related to the bottom. It's they're way more hydrodynamic on the bottom, and it just seems to be kind of the deal. That's what they go do, regardless of the outside, weather conditions or even water conditions. When we've got an excessive amount of current flow, you can pretty well bank he's going to be glued to the bottom. But let's talk about if they're not, because let's face it, there are times of the winter that that's not a huge player, and or even a body of water that doesn't have current flow. And as we all know, the dreaded jig-headed
All the
minnow
minner.
is one in the wintertime you simply cannot not have it. It's a huge player. This particular one is a 6-inch hinge minnow. I've actually we it's pretty chewed up. We caught several of it. I can't get it right here, but caught several of Kentucky Lake bass last weekend, my son's high school tournament. So this one's a little chewed up, but it's a huge player this time of year. I know some people scoff at it. I'm kind of middle of the road. I don't care what a bass is doing as
Whatever it
long.
bites, it's got to bite, and I'm going to catch it. That's the way I look
Exactly.
at it.
Everybody asks me my probably most frequently asked question is, "What's your favorite way to catch them?" Whatever they're biting that day, I got to catch them every day. So it's whatever's happening then and there, and we'll see. These fish get up off the bottom. They'll float around. A lot of the forage this time of year will actually, again, outside of current flow, will get suspended and oftentimes very high in the water column. They might be out over a deep basin, 20, 30 feet deep, but they're only utilizing the top, call it 3 to 10 feet of the water column. And there's just not a ton of baits that we have that really encompass that strike zone, like a jig-headed minnow, a jerk bait. There are a few, but the jig-headed minnow, no secret anymore. I will say I was very fortunate to get on the front end of that deal, and really hated to see it kind of get blown up the way that it did. I got a couple years here on the TVA where I don't want to say I was the only one throwing it, but I was about
It
2
felt
years
like it,
ahead
right?
of the vast majority. And holy cow, if you think the jig-headed minnow is something now, you should have seen it a couple years ago when they had not seen it from anybody.
Hmm.
Certainly something special, but something that doesn't get talked about a lot with the jig-headed minnow. Obviously, we utilize this primarily with forward-facing sonar, but this is not just for your forward lookers, as JT says. It's something that we're not going to cover a ton of water with. It's kind of a high percentage area, but it's pretty common that I'll pick this up after I've thrown an MR6 or maybe even slow rolled a spinnerbait down a lay down this time of year, to follow it up with a minnow, because it's so natural. It's so close to, what they're truly feeding on. There are times, especially when the conditions aren't the best, bluebird, calm. It's just hard to get them to react to something that's moving past them real fast. And again,
You just
the
hover that
more
bait.
realistic, the more nuance that you can get with that technique, the better off you are. And most importantly, is as long as they're suspended, I can cover any zone of the water column with this particular bait by simply changing both the size of my minnow, but most importantly, the size of my head. I not uncommon to have 3 or 4 of them on the front deck, and you say, well, why on earth? Why they're all the same color? Like, this is the green gizzard shad, my kind of where my starting point. It's my go-to color. I may have 4 of this exact color rigged up with different size jig heads, maybe different size minnows, whatever it may be, to kind of match the hatch and get that bait in the particular strike zone that they're utilizing. But
Sure.
absolutely, hands down, probably caught more bass in the wintertime in the last 2 years than most anything else in the last 5 or 6. It's pretty crazy how trend has taken off.
Here's my viewpoint on the jig head minnow, and I don't think it's very controversial. I think it's something that, as long as it is still legal for us to throw, if we do not have it on the deck, you will find yourself left behind.
Yep, absolutely,
And
absolutely. It
like, and
it's
there's
very
people who are
similar to
for
like
it, and there's people who are against it. But I
yep.
mean, really, if you're against it and you're not utilizing it still, you're basically kissing your tournament career. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, and
Unless
I
there's a
hate that.
fantastic jig bite on a dock going down, right? Or
Right, right, right.
you're
Yep.
slow rolling a spinner bait down the bank or fishing a flat with a trap, like you're going to get smoked.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, and I hate that all the negativity has, excuse me, been created around kind of the minnow. I mean, it's had this is going out on a limb, but had the jig-headed minnow not been introduced at roughly, I say introduced, it's been around for a while in different places, but we really picked it up over here in the U.S. at about the same time everybody really started picking up forward facing and live scope. This I really don't know that it would be as big of a fuss. I hate to say that, and I could be completely out of bounds on this, but had forward facing never come along, we would still be throwing a jig headed minnow. Would it be as dominant as it is? Absolutely not.
No,
But I
you're
promise you, there would have been multiple major tournaments still won on a jig headed minnow. It's just kind of the timing of the two came together, and this is such a powerful bait, and the technology again is so powerful. Look, here's where, and we're getting in the weeds here big time. We'll get back on track, but the for and I hate to even say this, but let's just tell it how it is. For years and years and years, there were a small handful of anglers that were proficient at what they did. And the general knowledge of a weekend angler was so much further behind where it is today. Again, much with this podcast and YouTube, and there's so many resources out there. We're all getting so good. 20 years ago, you didn't have that. You didn't see that, kind of parlay all the way down the chain. You might have your upper level anglers that were very proficient at certain techniques, but with all of us getting so good, it comes down to efficiency now. It's not, man, I understand a jig bite way better than these other 55 guys in the tournament or whatever it may be. We all have probably watched the exact same videos, read the same exact articles. Like we all have this same foundation of knowledge, and the only way to get yourself kind of a leg ahead is to be more efficient, in my
hmm
opinion. And the forward facing has, there's no arguing it. It certainly has. And again, I hate that it's kind of split the industry. It's our industry is not as big as what it needs to be to have a split like this, but I hope that we can all come together and find some happy ground where we can all be happy and coincide together. So
sure. Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's such a funny, touchy subject for me because, like, even guys here in Buffalo, where I'm guiding at, they're like, "I can't believe you use that forward-facing sonar stuff." But I'm like, "Yeah, it's changed the way I fish, but I mean, clients are happy when I'm able to put them on bigger fish than they would have been able to catch 2, 3, maybe 4 years ago, right? Like it's just a tool, and the moment we realize it's just a tool, we're all going to be better for it. Everyone threw a hoopla when Kevin Van Dam had side scan before everyone else, right?
yep,
Like
yep,
and
yep.
side scan.
And look, hey, I understand. Like, this is it's a totally different, piece of technology. We're able to utilize it in ways that we've never been able to utilize anything else. But it's just kind of the natural progression of life. I
Yeah.
mean, we're
So
seeing new
what's next?
technologies
That's
in
the question,
all
right?
sorts
What's
of
next?
industries. Do it now?
What's next? That's the
Yeah,
question that
exactly.
remains to be
There's,
seen.
I assure you, they have something or are working on something. There is something that if you think we're upset about it now, it's going to be no telling what the next advancement in all this is. And again, it's all made and produced for us to be better anglers. And there's no doubt I have learned more in the last, call it roughly 5 years, however long I've had forward. I have learned more in the past few years that are factual, black and white, evidence, so to speak, to back a certain theory that we've all had than I ever did in the previous 25. I mean, it's just there's no way around, and we're all becoming better anglers, and I'll have to admit we're making the fish a little smarter, regardless of the species
Oh,
or the
for
body of
sure.
water.
No
We are
doubt.
certainly educating them in a way that they've never been educated before, and I don't have a right or wrong answer. I'm kind of okay in the middle. To be honest with you, I really enjoy the BPT format. Let us have it, let us utilize it in practice, but limit it, in the tournament. I kind of think we found a good happy place there, and it seems to be that way for the viewers, and yeah, I just hope that again we can come together on this. I hate to see us all kind of split and torn apart. The sport of fishing was, I don't know if this is entirely true, but in my mind, it was designed to be a leisurely sport. Obviously, you put a lot of money on the line. You put plaques and tournaments and egos on. It's not so much that, but I hope that we can kind of bring that all full circle and kind of bring that back. I mean, this is supposed to be fun,
Yep.
enjoyable.
I
It's
think we can all like preach a little bit towards this. We should all be stewards towards positivity, right? Like, and the
absolutely.
more positive that all of us are, the better off humanity and civilization is. And it doesn't have to be fake positivity, right? Like when times to be negative or and you have to be negative, we should be negative. But in the grand scheme of things, like if you look at something that's negative in a positive light, it's probably going to work out better for you.
You're exactly right.
So,
You're
like, I
exactly
think we
right.
should all be stewards of positivity to a point. And honestly, like, it speaks volumes even in just angling. If you're positive and you're confident when you're fishing, your chances of catching fish go exponentially up, right? Because if
Yes.
you're negative, your mind's not in it. If you're positive, you're in it. Like, so,
And that's not just with fishing. We see that in everyday life and everything
yeah,
you do. Like I had started working out somewhat, kind of, sort of. This
haven't we all,
illness,
right?
yeah, this illness has kind of put me behind schedule here. But like I have never been a big gym guy. I've never like I've just I love physical labor, but I want to see something done at the end of it. I'm one of those. Like I don't want to walk out of the
You're
gym and
just
think
working towards
all the
Pop
equipment's
Lawrence status. That's all.
exactly, exactly. But I've really tried to go into this with a more positive, frame of mind and a different mentality, and it truly has.
It
It's changed
helps.
the way I think about working out and kind of. Body strengthening, and it's all just between your ears. So much of all this, and it's just
Absolutely.
again, you said it best. Regardless of what we're doing and what we're into, positivity is going to make everything better. And there's a time and a place for for us to try to make things better. Don't get me wrong, but positivity as a whole is going to make everything run smoother, and you're probably going to be more efficient at whatever it is that you do.
Mhm.
So it's always a good thing there. But to kind of bring this all full circle, something that again we mentioned before. Just want to kind of go over a brief synopsis. If there is one major misconception in wintertime fishing, it's that they all live out deep. We just as we've discussed, we know these fish will live shallow. Current does help kind of push those fish there and generate, but don't count out a day that's 45 or 50 degrees. It's warm and sunny. As long as the water temperatures are, call it 10 degrees lower than the air temperature, and the sun certainly helps, there is usually some sort of shallow bite going on. Those fish will shift up there real shallow in sun, and a lot of times they'll be as aggressive as they're going to be all year long up there and call it less than 3 or 4 feet of
Yeah.
water. So The current does position these fish. I always encourage you to look at areas where the current will hit the hardest, but there is something there to create, an eddy. Whether it be a little shallow point, could be one giant boulder sticking out, it could be a lay down. Any number of things could create that, change in direction of the current. But behind that will create an eddy, kind of a slack water, and there are times when they're in absolutely in the slack water, and there are times when they're right on that seam, where we go from that, a current flow, heavy flow to kind of that slack water there.
Let the fish tell you what they want and where they are, and just go fishing and have fun is what it comes down to, right?
Absolutely.
Perfect. Well,
Couldn't have said it better.
Jake, do you think there's anything else we should touch on here before we wrap it up?
Um, Man, I really, as always, I always enjoy coming on here, and I've had a great time talking to you. There's uh, I encourage everyone to go out this winter and spend some time fishing shallow like that. However, if we're going to do that, I will say, and this is something that I failed to mention, it typically can be an afternoon bite. The
Hmm.
wintertime is not a time that I'm going to traditionally get up at daylight necessarily and make sure I'm on the water watching the sun come up. Wintertime fishing to me, I'm usually putting the boat in at say 10 or 11 o'clock and fishing till maybe an hour before dark, before the sun kind of goes behind the trees. And those are the times of the day, or that kind of mid morning to late afternoon it seems to be the window that they're the most aggressive.
Absolutely. I've noticed that just in general of all species of fish, right? Like
Absolutely.
when the sun gets warm or the day is at its warmest temp, and it almost seems like to me it's like the temp peaks, right? And then as it starts to
Correct.
fall, they almost get the most active.
And that's what I say. Like that last hour of
Yeah.
dark, hour and a half, really.
They
It,
chew.
I'm not saying you can't catch one, but it's weird once they start to feel the air temperature, and I'm assuming the water temperature start to decrease. I mean,
And
the
it's gone.
slightest,
Yep.
it's over. It's done. And
They're like,
and
see you tomorrow
not
at
that you.
1:30 p.m. Like
Yep, exactly. That is prime time.
all right, man. Well, I appreciate it again taking out this awesome hour to come on here and spill some beans. It's I look forward to every time that we get you on here. And one of these days, we'll get you on the actual Serious Angler podcast and we'll have a
Let's do it.
really in-depth conversation about something rather than techniques and baits. So I greatly appreciate your time today, my friend, and I hope you have a good one.
Well, thank you for having me, and I look forward to doing. Let's do one here real soon.
Yeah, I will. We'll get Bailey on board and we'll figure out a day. All right.
Perfect. Sounds great. Thanks so much for having me.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks everyone for watching this week's episode here on the Lure Lab. We greatly appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed that one. Jake dropped a ton of nuggets and juice and ways to be more efficient in the wintertime and put a bunch of bass in the boat. So if you enjoyed this episode and you made it this far and you're new here on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. We greatly appreciate it. Drop a comment down below what maybe your favorite 3 techniques are to throw in the wintertime. And and if you're listening on your favorite podcast platform and it allows you to leave a review, please do so. And if you send us a message proving that you left a review on one of our social media platforms, maybe we'll mail out a sticker to you. So make sure you do that. Let us know that you did it and you get rewarded. So we appreciate everyone who tunes in every week here to the Lure Lab and even the Serious Angler Network and all of our awesome shows that we have. And until next week, we will see you then.